everybody. Welcome back to the Film Buds Podcast. This is our 42nd bonus show, and my name is Henry. And it is just me this time around, but that's okay. Got a pretty good show for you. This time we are going to be talking, or I am going to be talking, the Scream franchise. So going all the way from the original Scream in 1996 to Scream 6, which just came out in this year, 2023. I'm fairly new to the Scream series, only really got into it after these two recent movies, so I kind of had to backtrack a little bit, but figured I love slasher franchises like this, and this is definitely one of my favorites after having seen all of them now. So really excited to talk about them. Hopefully you are too. But thank you very much for downloading, donating, subscribing, however you got this episode. And we hope that if you did not get it through Bandcamp, please go to filmbuds.bandcamp.com and you can download all previous Film Buds bonus episodes for just a $5 monthly subscription. Or you can just download ones for $1 or more individually. So thank you very much either way, and we hope you'll subscribe, rate, review the show, all those things. Follow us on social media, on Letterboxd, all that good stuff. So thank you very much for being here in whatever way you got here. So as I said, the first Scream movie that I saw in its entirety was Scream 5, or the kind of quote-unquote requel from 2022, but it's, technically Scream 5. And then I saw Scream 6 shortly after. And then I went back and rewatched all of the first four. So I'm, for the only seeing the movies probably in the last year or so. It was one of the only slasher franchises that I had missed. Halloween is my favorite, and I'd seen most of the others, but this is just one that just slipped through the cracks. But now it is one of my favorites. I think it's awesome. I cannot wait for Scream 7 whenever that's coming out. I'm dying to see it. I love Ghostface. I love just the structure and concept of the series. And yeah, so really looking forward to getting into these movies. Other than that, I have a Ghostface tattoo. That's, just kind of random, but I have a small one on my arm, which is pretty cool. Michael Myers one as well. But anyways, sidebar there. Let's get into the first one, which is Scream, which came out in 1996. The original Scream is directed by Wes Craven, who also went on to do the Screams 1 through 4, and then he passed away shortly after doing the fourth film. But this one made $173 million against a budget of $15, so pretty big hit. All of these movies have been pretty big hits, not billion-dollar hits, but pretty successful for the budget. It's definitely become one of the most iconic slasher franchises and movies, I would say. And Ghostface is pretty iconic in a variety of ways, and he pops up obviously at Halloween, and it's such a really cool concept, I think, and design. As I said, I did not see this one, I think, until this year. Maybe last year. I can't remember, but I had seen Scream 5 and 6 before going back to these. And I think, flat out, the movie is still a classic. It's my favorite of the franchise, 6 being the runner-up. But I think when I first saw 5 and 6, the self-referential stuff about, how movies and horror movies are structured and that playing into the movie itself and mean that meta aspect kind of annoyed me. But after having gone back and watched the first 4 and rewatched all 6 in about a 48-hour period, I kind of liked that about it. And so I think if you start out with 5 and 6 and that kind of annoys you, I would say go back and watch and then go in order. The cast, like David Arquette, Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox. Of course, the opening scene is probably one of the most iconic in horror movie history with Drew Barrymore and the phone call. And of course, that is the signature part of the series with the phone call from Ghostface and him watching these people and then suddenly coming out of nowhere. I love that. And I think the opening scene is awesome still. I think it is similar to something like Michael Myers, but I'd say even more so in this, the idea of a killer just being in a Ghostface Halloween costume that you can buy at any store, is really clever and also a scary thing. And they play into that later in the series where anybody can go and buy these masks and these costumes, and it could be anyone, especially in 5 and 6 where there's copycats and all these things where they're everywhere, and it actually could be anyone. It's not just like Michael Myers, it's obviously it's Michael Myers or it's not, or it's Leatherface or it's not. But in this, it's it could be anyone. or like the tagline says, it's always someone you know, which I think is it's very well done, especially in this original movie. The whole cast, I love David Arquette. I think he's the fan favorite of these movies, but he has this kind of doofy, lovable personality to him, and I think he's great even in the recent films as well. But really, everybody is great. I think Neve Campbell's arc over these movies is pretty interesting, where she's constantly, similar to someone like Jamie Lee Curtis in Halloween, where she's kind of terrorized over and over and over and over again, and then she tries to find ways of getting revenge and justice and not becoming a victim anymore. I think that's a pretty good idea, and it's something that it shares with Halloween. I think the high school setting is great. The fact that it could be anyone in a ghost face mask. It could be the friend, a family member, and how they kind of play with that idea throughout the movies. And then I think one thing about the franchise that probably does it better than almost any other slasher series is I think the third acts are almost always one of, if not the best part of the movie. Whereas I think a lot of these movies, the climax can kind of be hit or miss. And it can be either go way too over the top, or it could just be underwhelming. I think these movies with the twists, who it is, who you think it is, monologues, I guess self-aware monologues about horror movies and sequels and villains and all that stuff, I think is pretty fun and pretty clever. Usually don't like that kind of thing. I think the meta self-aware aspect, and obviously these movies are pretty influential, but I think in these movies it works for the most part. I think especially the ending scene in this first movie is so iconic, like with the killers stabbing each other and it all just going, they're just being complete maniacs. And then that legacy carrying on in the other movies, I think is really, really well done. Courtney Cox is fun. This was her, probably her most well-known movie role aside from being in Friends. And, Wes Craven, he of course did A Nightmare on Elm Street. He's a horror legend. He's not like my all-time favorite horror director, but he is definitely up there, and this is my favorite of his filmography for sure. Other than that, it is one that if you like horror movies, if you like slasher movies, if you've seen the recent films and not these, I would say this is a must watch. It's not like one I would not say it's overhyped. It's not it's not Citizen Kane, but I think for what it is, it still holds up really, really well. And it's definitely one of my favorite horror movies ever. Yeah, it's just fantastic. I feel like it's very easily watchable. The only thing that I would say that this series does not have, as opposed to some of the others like it, is a good theme, a good score. I feel like something like Halloween, obviously that score is really, really embedded in pop culture and in that series. But in this, I feel like there's never really a catchy, memorable score or theme to these movies. And that's the only thing that I would say makes it not as impactful as something like Halloween for me, it's not a big deal, but I feel like I just wish there was something a little bit more signature trademark in terms of the music for these movies. But obviously it still has plenty of influential, impactful aspects and designs to it, which, I really appreciate, but that's the only thing I wish it had that it doesn't. Other than that, I think it's great across the board. So it is a 5 out of 5 for me. Heavy 5 out of 5. All right, let's get to Scream 2, which came out 1 year later and also directed by Wes Craven. It made $172 million against a budget of $24. So another big hit. Also similar to the first one, the opening scene in this movie is awesome at the movie theater, where as the series progresses, because of the Ghostface killings in the real world, it's Hollywood takes on the Stab movie series, which is just like the Scream franchise within the context of the movie. So again, that meta aspect to it, which I could see how some people could see that as obnoxious and, in the wrong light. I might even too, but I think it does work, especially maybe watching these movies in quick succession. I don't know, but I think that is awesome, where everyone's wearing the Ghostface mask. And again, that's like, you don't know who it is. Could be anybody, could be a stranger, could be someone you know. And I think where the girlfriend ends up getting stabbed on stage and everyone like not knowing if it's real or if it's part of the movie or like being staged, I think is really clever. The boyfriend being killed. And of course, this one gets into Courtney Cox's character, who is the anchor, the celebrity who is sometimes tries to profit off of these killings that even she was involved in the first movie, or she was around and, writing books and all these things, and her people around her thinking she's exploiting the situation and that controversy, which I think is pretty, maybe relevant is too strong of a word for this kind of movie, but I think there is that easily relatable aspect in today's world where there's tragedies, there's, shootings or wars, whatever, and people immediately try and profit off of the notoriety of it, writing books, making movies like based on a true story, and it's like some tragedy, even just a few years after the event. And so I think that definitely is you can see how that is a very real thing, especially even more so nowadays. And so I like her character. I like that dynamic. I think Neve Campbell, again, is very good. And David Arquette's relationship with everyone is really, he just has that, like, he's, kind of innocent, but he still stands up for, what's right and does everything he can. And so I think he's such a really good character, and I really like that performance. Now, this movie, spoilers here, of course, this one has Laurie Metcalf, fantastic actor, Liev Schreiber, and then Timothy Oliphant, who, from Justified fame, who I love. I did not realize he was in this when I first saw it. I think he's awesome. And the twist at the end where it's him and Laurie Metcalf, it's those twists and turns that I think in whatever way, for whatever reason, they pull it off well. So it's not like, oh, it's him. It's like, it's just kind of fun. It's a fun twist. And it's, even if it's absurd, they pull it off well. It just comes down to execution. And the whole sequence at the theater where Courtney Cox is being chased is awesome. And then Neve Campbell gets in, David Arquette, I think those separate storylines are all great. And then the movie ends off with Liev Schreiber being seen as this like hero, like, oh yeah, I survived Ghostface. And then that leads it into the third movie as well. But this one is a solid film. It's a solid sequel. It's probably in the middle of the pack for me. Definitely one of the better earlier movies. One small issue with all of these movies, I'd say some more so than others, is I think they're all a little too long. They're all about 2 hours, and I think that they're just points where almost all of them drag a little bit. And I think the first one and the fifth and sixth don't really drag all that much, but I think 2, 3, and 4, they just feel too long for the story that's there. Like something like Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street, Texas Chainsaw, they're almost all like 80, 90 minutes. And I think in some ways, yeah, these movies set themselves apart because they're longer and they have a little bit more story and more characters. Sometimes they do that better in others. And I think in this one, it's still solid. Like I said, it's entertaining. It's fun. It's got, good Ghostface killings and horror and chase shock sequences and all that good stuff that Wes Craven does so well. And I guess maybe watching these movies close together, they do kind of run together as well. I feel like some things are really memorable, and then I kind of forget which plot line is which, because they are all very similar, as with any franchise like this. They're all playing off of each other and calling back, which is okay. There's nothing wrong with that, especially in a series like this. But a solid movie, good ending. I think the boyfriend being hung up on it's like a wheel or a board, and then him being killed is really good. And this gets into the idea of characters not believing like their boyfriends, their girlfriends, their family members. Hey, is it you? Could it be you? I mean, the whole series does play into like paranoia, distrust, betrayal, all that kind of thing, which is pretty apparent, and it works. Yeah, a little too long. Maybe could have been tightened up a little bit. Not as good as the first, obviously, but still, in terms of sequels, definitely not the worst. So that is a 4 out of 5 for me. All right, let's get to Scream 3, which came out in 2000, directed by Wes Craven as well. This one made $161 million against the budget of $40, so another hit for sure. But I think this one is considered to be the worst, at least of the first 4. At least that's the kind of general vibe I get from people and reading reviews. I agree. I think it is I still like it. I think I'll say it's 3.5. Which, for a horror series, that's not bad for that being the worst one. Usually, like, Halloween, Texas Chainsaw, Nightmare on Elm Street. For me, I have like 1.5 out of 5, but this is 3.5. So that's definitely not bad for a series that has 6 movies. Pretty consistent in quality. My favorite part about the movie is the Hollywood aspect and setting, it gets more into the stab sequels within the context of the movie, which works. I think Jenny McCarthy's role in this is really fun, and her death is a pretty pretty intense part of the movie, or one of the more memorable parts. But more so than any of them, this one feels way too long for what it is. It is about 2 hours, and there are parts that just drag. It feels too overly complicated, trying to get into too much meta ideas and all that. But still, it's still solid. I feel like I just like being with these characters, even if I don't love this movie. I just like being in the world. With Ghostface, I feel like it's very, not easy, but they always find ways of making his introductions and his phone calls and his kills very creative and entertaining and scary, creepy. In this movie, it's definitely pretty good. Like, I think one good part is in the trailer. I think it's a trailer. And then the final sequence, again, they kill it with the ending in the house or the mansion. I think all that really works. And the whole idea of double tapping a villain, it's like, oh yeah, the villain always comes back, so shoot him in the head. I think that is a fun part. I could see how it could get on people's nerves, but for me, it works. And they always do find a way, even if they lag a little bit or veer off in the middle, I think they always find a way to bring it back to a boiling point, and it works. So I feel like I'm always left with a good taste when these movies end, as opposed to a lot of others that don't always. I feel like I'm always satisfied by the ending, even if I'm not like, that's a 5 out of 5. But the Hollywood aspect is great. The Stab movie series within the movie is really clever. Emily Mortimer has a small part in this. I love her. Patrick Dempsey's in this. Scott Foley. So, pretty Parker Posey. So, pretty decent cast, I would say. Scores by Marco Beltrami, who I actually interviewed on my other podcast, The Music Buds, in one of the first 10 episodes, I think. So you can check that out on any podcast streaming site. I actually interviewed him. So that was really cool. But, good score. Again, I wish there was more of a theme in these movies. There's just nothing musically that I take from these films, which is okay again, but I just wish there was. But still, a solid score. It's well directed. It's well edited. Pretty decently acted. Like, the acting isn't amazing, but compared to others like it, the acting's pretty solid. Like Arquette, Cox, Dempsey, Campbell, like everyone is holds their own, I think, more so than they need to. Overall, my least favorite of the series, just too long, sometimes drags, gets a little dull, maybe repeats a little too much from the other movies, tries too hard to keep the series going. And even though there are definitely some creative, entertaining, cool sequences, just not a home run for me. But still worth watching for sure. And being a 3.5 out of 5 is definitely not the worst. Not bad for being my least favorite in a series. So, and I'd be curious to hear what other people have, how you rate them. Maybe you're way more harsher than I am, but I feel like it's kind of hard to hate these movies. I don't know. there's nothing offensively wrong with any of them, I find. Whereas Halloween series, Texas Chainsaw, Nightmare on Elm Street, there are some movies that are just horrible. And I think this series has not gotten to that point yet, even close to. So light 3.5. Maybe it's a little generous, but so what? I like the Hollywood setting. Love Ghostface always. And I'll rewatch it again. I feel like all these movies I've seen twice now, I think. And I could watch them all again pretty easily. So, all right. Let's get to Scream 4, which came out in 2011, so 11 years later. Directed by Wes Craven. It made $97 million against a budget of $40, so I would say the least successful financially of the series for sure. Still, made its money back, made a little profit, but not as big as the others or the ones that came after. This one, I feel like people saw as more of a reboot, because it was a long time after the third one, and it gets more back into the teen horror angle as the first one did. And this is an improvement for me over the third. It's probably still my second to least favorite, but it's a very solid horror movie. It brings back pretty much the whole rest of the cast, but Emma Roberts is in it. Hayden Panettiere, I can never say that name right. Alison Brie's in it. Adam Brody, a pretty good cast, and I think Alison Brie's death in this is pretty iconic with the being thrown off the building. Then Emma Roberts reveal at the end where she's, one of the killers. And I think I do really like how there are multiple killers in these movies. It's not just the same person or one person. It's the idea of it could be anyone. It could be 2 people, 3 people, 10 people. And so I think that's one thing that you're always able to keep moving, keep creative with that, because it's like, yeah, it could be anyone. It could be 20 people, it could be a whole city, and so I think she's really great in it. I don't love Emma Roberts as a whole, but I think she's pretty good in these movies, and she's good in American Horror Story. I think the angle about the high school film club and trying to get interviews with like Courtney Cox's character and trying to videotape things is pretty cool. And how, one of them ends up being one of the killers, and them wanting to actually film the deaths and make their own movie, and all that stuff is pretty creepy and weird, but it pretty well done in the movie, and it works, and it's definitely brings plenty of good horror and unsettling moments and sequences. I think once again the ending is great at the house with Emma Roberts and the boyfriend, and then at the hospital with Neve Campbell, and where Emma Roberts comes back and tries to kill her, and that whole sequence is awesome. So it leaves a good taste in the mouth, even though it is still a little long. Maybe could have been tightened up a little bit, but a good return to form. And it was a good, nice kind of send off for Wes Craven, because I think, obviously he's the top point of this, the founder of this series. Even if he didn't write it, he obviously is the name that's most associated with it. I think Emma Roberts trying to fake that it was not her involved in the killings at the house, like beating herself up and stabbing herself and all that, calls back to the originals, but also still works and feels fresh enough. Yeah, it's a solid movie. It's one that, as I said, all of them are watchable. I feel like I could pop any of them on and be like equally entertained, and which I can't say about a lot of others like it. There's always something to enjoy, latch on to, laugh at, be scared of, and I feel like more so than a lot of others, I really want this series to continue. Like, I want 20 more movies. I happily would take it. I just love being in this world, and I really do love the series. But other than that, in the movie, David Arquette, Courtney Cox are kind of coming back together. There's Courtney Cox once again and her controversy, and then Neve Campbell trying to move on from it and deal with her trauma, and then constantly being taken back to that terror. I think all of that is emotionally effective, and I really like her performance across all the movies. So, solid film. Not still be lower on the list for me. I'll say it's a 4 out of 5, and worth. If you haven't seen it yet, definitely check it out. I don't think you even really need to see the others to see it. I think that's one thing, is you probably could see 3 or 4 or even 2 without really having seen the first one. That's just, maybe I'm wrong, but I think you could still enjoy it. So yeah, 4 out of 5, solid movie. All right, let's get to Scream, which is the 2022 sequel, remake, whatever you want to call it. It's directed by Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillett, who also did Ready or Not and VHS. That's about it in terms of big films. It stars Melissa Barrera, Jenna Ortega, Mason Gooding, Jack Quaid, and then the original cast as well. It made $138 million against a budget of $24, so a big hit. Kind of going back to the first few, financially pretty successful, critically pretty successful. As I said, this was the first one I saw in its entirety. I saw it back either early this year or late last year, and didn't know much about the Scream series. I was like, oh, well, here, I'll give this a shot, and if I like it, I'll go back and watch the others. And when I first saw it, I did not love it. The self-referential stuff just did not really work for me, anything like that. But I've seen it maybe twice since then, and now I think it's probably my third favorite in the series. Whether you want to call it a cheap remake or whatever, that's fine. But I think it's enough of its own movie to stand on its own and not just be like a remake. There are at times a few too many self-referential things. The movie itself, very well directed. I think Melissa Barrera and Jenna Ortega are like perfect together. And I think they're both just great actors. And Jenna Ortega's opening sequence in this with the phone call is awesome. The look of Ghostface in this movie and in 6 is just, I think, the best that they've ever done. I think bringing the original cast back doesn't really feel like just a cash grab. Like it's written well enough to where it makes sense why they come back in the context that they do. Obviously, David Arquette dies in this one. He's been stabbed and shot so many times by Ghostface, and they finally get him. The whole sequence in the hospital is so good. Like where Jenna Ortega's in the wheelchair, and then she falls, and then Ghostface is there. I think that's definitely one of the best parts of the movie for sure. And then one actor in this, Mikey Madison, who was also in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I don't know why. I love her. I think I wish she was in way more stuff. I think she has such an interesting look, and I think she's a very good actor. One thing I do find, though, is she, ends up being one of the killers, and she's killed and then like burned alive and shot. And basically that's how she dies in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So I find it kind of funny. She's almost been typecast as a maniac killer who gets burned alive at the end. So kind of a interesting way to get roles, but hey, it works, I guess. But I think I just find her to be such an interesting actor. I don't know why exactly, but I love her in this. I love her in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I've seen her in a few other things, but I really, really like her. I really like how Melissa Barrera, she's the son, or she's the daughter of Billy Loomis from the first movie. So it's like the child of a serial killer, and how you deal with that. Like, I think that's pretty good idea, and speaks true to things happening today where people are, a lot of horrible things are happening, and it's very, very public, and people are, associated with them, and they're having to kind of deal with that humiliation, the embarrassment, the trauma, and I think that works. The sequence at the end where at the house, the original house, is really good. I think if you want to call it cheap, whatever, I think it's pretty well done. It's pretty fun. It's pretty well directed and well acted. I think it's just, in terms of sequels, requels, whatever the heck they call it in these movies, I think it's probably one of the best. Like, I'd say it's by far, just as good as some of the new Halloween movies, the David Gordon Green ones. I think it's, if not even better. I think it's just cleanly directed. It's well acted. It's got good humor. It's got good scares. The violence is effective. Interesting ideas. Like, it's just a good reboot that does not feel too cheap to me in almost any way. But it is the third best in the series, in my opinion. It's one that I feel like I could once again pop on and just really enjoy. Like, I could just rewatch it many, many times. And I think Jenna Ortega and Melissa Barrera are, like, as I said, they're some of the best parts of these new movies, and I hope they continue to be in them. With David Arquette dying, obviously Courtney Cox is heartbroken over that, and she's not there to save him like she was in some of the others, or to help him. And he ends up getting gutted by Ghostface, which is a pretty intense part of the movie. There's just something, as it's clearly the case, there's just something so interesting, mysterious, crazy, intriguing about Ghostface. Like, just his portrayal in the movie, who ends up being Ghostface, the look, the physicality, all that stuff. And I think one thing with these movies, especially in 6, that is really effective is like how the stabbings by Ghostface go. Like, it's like this really, really intense, rapid, like you can really feel those stabbings. And I think that's one improvement over the others, or it's even better, is like you feel those stabs, and it's like, it's really intense. It's really brutal. But not to the point of just being like almost like Rob Zombie-esque. Like, it's done well enough to where it doesn't feel too indulgent. It's just like, you're like, Jesus Christ. But a great movie to me, has improved over each watch. I think it'll probably continue to be. It's almost on par with 6, but I think 6 is even better. Definitely worth watching. Even if you haven't seen the others, watch it. You don't need to see the others at this. If you haven't, to watch this one to understand it, like, it's its own movie. 4.5 out of 5. Heavy 4.5 out of 5. Maybe call that too generous. I don't know, but I really love this movie, and I really love 6. All right, let's end off with Scream 6. So this one came out this year, 2023, and directed once again by Matt, I can not say the name, Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillett. This one made $169 million against a budget of $35, so another big hit. Pretty well received critically. I saw this one pretty much right after I saw 5, so they kind of blended together a little bit there. This is my second favorite. It's almost on par with number 1 for me. I think some people did not love this movie, which it's whatever. I get it, but I think this movie is so well put together, well written, well acted. Ghostface is like, I love the look of old Ghostface, like the cracks in his mask. I think once again the killings are like the most brutal they've been yet, but effectively so, not gratuitous. Like the opening scene with Samara Weaving is awesome, where she's out in the alleyway. That's great. It has the guy from Grand Budapest Hotel. He's like one of the killers at first, and then he gets killed. Like all that stuff is really, really well done. And yeah, it does follow the same formula as the others, but I think this is one of the best executed of any of them. Second best. I like the family aspect at the ending where, the killers, the killer's family are coming back to take down Melissa Barrera and, Jenna Ortega. I think that's a really interesting idea. And that legacy, the Scream or Stab franchise museum is really, really cool. And that's a great setting. Once again, the ending really is one of the best parts of the movie. I love the core four. I think the performances are good. The characters are good. It's fun. The chemistry is solid. Like, I think those four characters, those four actors are excellent. I like the father, daughter, and son family, like, killer idea. I think that's really good. I guess how that family is killed by Melissa Barrera and the core four is really good, and how at the end it looks down at the Ghostface mask and like it almost leads into, or it makes you think, am I going to be a killer now too? Am I going to be Ghostface? And then doesn't seem like that, which I think is a good idea, because I think throughout the whole movie she's just like, that's in her blood, quote unquote. And so she's like, am I supposed to be my dad? Am I supposed to be a killer? Am I supposed to be Ghostface? I think all that is a really interesting idea and suspenseful and weird and creepy. The sequence at the apartment building with the ladder across the windows is awesome, like where Ghostface is shaking her off. I think the best part of this movie, I know some people didn't like it, I loved it, is Ghostface with a shotgun. The Ghostface shotgun sequence in the gas station is my favorite scene in the movie. I think that is such a cool idea, because up until now, he's just used a knife, nothing else. But then it's like, hey, I have a shotguns here. Why not use it? I think it's so simple, but genius. And it works really, really well. And it's only in that one scene, but I love that. I love the look of it. I love the idea of it. Ghost, just that character with the shotgun is fantastic. Can't say enough about it. I don't know why I love it so much, but it's great. It's just a little tweak to the character, and then it just works really well. But yeah, I think this movie is fantastic. It's one of my favorite movies of this year. I've watched it twice now, and each time it gets better. There's not as much self-referential stuff in this, which is, I think for the most part, is good. I love how they mention Letterboxd in this. That's such a cool little plug. I have a Letterboxd account, follow me, and my wife Elle has one. Good score. It's well shot. It's well edited, well written, well acted. Definitely one of the best horror sequels recently. Reboots, whatever, requels, whatever you want to call it. Sequels, prequel. I think it is one of the best, and I'm dying to see part 7. I cannot wait. But New York City is a great setting for this character or for this world. The subway sequence where it's Halloween and subway goers are all in different villain and killer masks and costumes, and then the girl being unsure of if it is Ghostface watching her, and then like Ghostface coming through the subway. It's just it's 2 hours. I think it might be the longest of the 6. I could be wrong on that, but it does. I think I have any of them. It uses its runtime the best. There's enough character. There's enough ideas. The sequence with the therapist where Ghostface kills the therapist is great. And her trying to get therapy for what she's gone through, which is just insane. Therapist being like, you're crazy. I can't deal with this. Good luck, basically. And her having to deal with also the public's view of her because she's associated with the past killings and events. Melissa Barrera, that is, and Jenna Ortega. Jenna Ortega trying to move on. Melissa Barrera being kind of stuck on it. And that dynamic is really good. I love their chemistry together. The love stories in it are, there's nothing amazing in it, but I think there's good chemistry and it's memorable and the performances are good. I love this movie. If you don't love it, I can maybe see that. It's not some groundbreaking movie, but I think execution-wise, it is fantastic. And one of the best of the series and of recent horror films. And I'd say it's underrated. Maybe that's going too far, but I'd say it's underrated because it's a 5 out of 5 for me. 5 out of 5. And I rewatched it just about a week ago, and I was like, I was just in for this movie. I loved it. Please, more Ghostface with a shotgun or just little tweaks to that character like that, because I think there's a lot to be done with that character still. I've heard part 7 might be a Christmas movie. That would be interesting. as far as this one goes, it is awesome. It is worth watching. Definitely check it out. Check out part 5 as well. Beforehand, I would say. The sequence at Courtney Cox's apartment is great, where she's being chased through the house and she gets the gun. That's awesome. Like, again, the killings in this are, and also Melissa Barrera's crazy fast stabbing of the father at the end is just insane. Like, it's like 20, 30 stabs in rapid succession. Like, that's insane, but cinematically fantastic. Like, it's just a really well done movie. And I didn't love Ready or Not, which is one of their more recent movies, but this one and part 5, I'm just huge fans of. Cannot say enough about it. I'd say they're underrated again. Check them out. So, and ending on a very, very high note. So 5 out of 5 for that one. So, all right, well, I think that is about it. We definitely will, whenever part 7 comes out, definitely will be reviewing it in whatever way. Make sure to check out our other bonus episodes on Bandcamp, filmbuds.bandcamp.com. Follow us on Letterboxd, on social media at FilmBuds. Comment with suggestions, questions to read on the show, stuff you'd like to see reviewed, stuff you like, don't like, whatever. Love hearing from you. Follow us everywhere. Tell your friends, rate us, subscribe, all that stuff. We really appreciate it, and thank you for the continued listenership and the spike in listenership we've had recently. It's continued to rise, and so we really appreciate that. We hope you all will stick around, because we love having you. Yeah, well, I hope you enjoyed it even half as much as I did, and see you next time.